Reading 23 from the Psychological Commentaries on the Teaching of Gurdjieff and Ouspensky by Maurice Nicoll, Volume 2. Birdlip, June 10th, 1944. Stages of Awakening in the Work. We are accustomed to our own smells. Now, as long as we live comfortably in the thick and nauseating atmosphere of ourselves, taking everything for granted, including ourselves, we cannot awaken. Why is this so? It is because we have never begun to ask ourselves any questions as to what we are or what anything means. We simply eat and sleep, fight and quarrel, talk and hear, see and touch, move and feel. We take it all for granted, not having the slightest idea that it is extraordinary. We are easily satisfied in this respect. We move about on the surface of things and like and dislike, or love and hate, and so on, and it is all, as far as we are concerned, taken for granted. There is no sense of the strangeness of the whole business. If this is so, then certainly we are asleep, and it will take a good deal of pain and unpleasantness, a good deal of startling experience, many heavy shocks, to awaken us to the beginning of our real thinking. Life contains many natural shocks, of which one is death. Being confronted with death can sometimes make us begin to think in a real way. But the torrent of the senses and the screaming note of modern life dulls and deafens this thinking point, so that it rarely emerges and becomes felt. Certainly we are upset if we do not have our own way in matters that closely concern us, but this does not make us think about what and where we are, but on the contrary usually puts us more to sleep than ever. We again plunge into life expecting to have our desires ultimately fulfilled, and regard all temporary or continual failure in this respect as very exceptional. However, all this is necessary until we begin to think. Then a new situation has begun in us. We have begun to think. This work is to make us think. Not to think how we can get the better of someone who we feel has let us down, or how to attract someone who ignores us, or how to get more personal power, more attraction or more pleasure, more comfort, better position, or how to say more unpleasant things of others. No, this work is to make us think exactly of all that side of us, through self-observation, so that we begin to see what and where we are ourselves. However, this takes a long time, and nothing is worse than to pretend we know already. A person who pretends to have or to know what he or she does not have or know, such a person has a picture of himself or herself. This stops everything real in every direction of development. Of all the casting out of devils mentioned in the Gospels, the casting out of pictures of oneself must surely come first, for pictures hinder every new experience and every line of inner development. We all have pictures of ourselves. Wherever they lie, there they stop development in a more real sense than a ton of concrete will prevent anything from growing beneath it. We think of the imagination as a light, airy nothingness. But the imagination is very powerful, very real, like concrete. Pictures are formed out of imagination, controlled by vanity. They are fixed forms of imagination woven by vanity. Vanity is a terrific force in us, and imagination is the powerful builder and bricklayer of vanity. It builds pictures of ourselves. Then we cannot move into a new stage of ourselves, into new ideas and feelings and experiences and meaning. Of course, we do not see either our vanity or our pictures of ourselves. They are too close to us. We are them. We may see the results of vanity, but not it. We see the results of it when we are insulted or taken for granted. We take ourselves for granted, but do not like others to do so. A paradox at first sight, but not really so. In short, where we are vain, there we are blind to ourselves. None of us thinks he or she is vain. None of us really thinks he or she has dominating pictures that are served all day. They are too close, too much ourselves. The side of what we actually are and the side of what we pretend and imagine we are two contradictory sides. These two contradictory sides, however, exist in everyone without exception. The action of the work, once it is beginning to be wished for, makes us become gradually aware of this contradiction over many years. Then we begin to have traces of real suffering, interspersed with all sorts of attempts at self-justifying and excuses and reactions, until we become, by inner taste, sick of self-justifying and excuses and so on. This marks a stage in the work, a definite point in self-development. Here, pictures weaken. For a long time, the work is something outside. One makes notes about it and draws diagrams and asks questions about words. Then it either begins to penetrate into the understanding or not. If it does, and you wish it, the work enters oneself. Then it begins, as it were, to judge you, to point out this or that, very mildly at first, more distinctly afterwards. One tries to avoid it, of course, but once it has penetrated oneself, by trying to avoid it, one only increases one's inner difficulties, realizing that one cannot do without it, and that to be deprived of its mild current of new meaning is worse than death. One realizes then what it means to be dead in the sense of the work. This stage is easily imitated and often is. Then one talks a lot of one's difficulties, etc. Later one becomes more silent. To talk about one's difficulties is a sign that one has not understood much. But it is a necessary stage for everyone to pass. The work is a series of stages in the understanding of it. If it does not penetrate, it remains words on the surface. Then you argue about everything. But its ideas are spermatic, that is, capable of penetrating and fertilizing the mind and feeling. Otherwise it would not be work, real teaching. It corresponds to something we have forgotten, something waiting in us, something to which we have gone to sleep long ago, something covered over by continual life. That is why this ancient teaching can awaken us. All awakening is unpleasant. One can always avoid unpleasantness by means of all the apparatus of the false personality, by ingenious or even stupid arguing, by insincerity, by buffers, by self-justifying, by negative attitudes, by lying, by not trying to think, by resorting to pictures, by resorting to all kinds of things to keep one's sleep intact. But if the work penetrates, this becomes more and more difficult. One begins to become aware that the work is really saying something hard to catch, and that perhaps it is quite true. This is painful. It is sometimes scarcely endurable, and at the same time a very marvelous experience. It is painful to one side of us, marvelous to another side. Of course, all this will sound very strange to those who come to meetings expecting that the work will cure their rheumatism, or improve their business, or help them to have a jollier time, or tell them exactly what to eat and drink. I do not see how such a level of regarding the work can lead anywhere. The whole conception is too small, too selfish, too self-centered. A deeper sense of life is necessary, one that can eventually grasp the 3 lines of work. Work for and on oneself, work with and for others, and work in and for the work itself. There is a saying in this work that it is to transmute lead into gold. This is speaking in the terms of ancient alchemical language. The subject of real alchemy was man and his inner transformation. But the work adds that a person must already have gold to make more gold. A person must have some special understanding to start with. This is called the possession of magnetic center, which is the first sign of different being. You would do well to reflect on this point and discuss it. Speaking from another side, the work aims at the development of mechanical man, 1, 2, and 3, into number 4 man, that is, balanced man. In this respect, certain kinds of efforts are expected apart from working on oneself in the line of non-identifying, self-remembering, inner separation, and so on. I must say here, once more, that self-remembering is the most important thing of all and has many degrees and stages. Everyone can, to a limited degree, begin to practice and understand self-remembering. Full self-remembering is one thing, but many degrees exist in the approach to it. Obeying the work at a critical moment is one form of self-remembering. But to continue, since the goal of number 4 man refers to a man whose centers all have some development, so that a person is not one-sided, merely a good golfer, or merely a good scientist, or merely an artist, and so on. It is necessary to educate oneself. "How," said Mr. Ouspensky on one occasion, "how can you expect to come into the possession of great knowledge when you have made no effort to get to know any of the ordinary knowledge that is accessible to everyone?" Now, if we divide a man's work into work on the line of his knowledge and work on the line of his being, it is possible to realize that work on the line of knowledge may include not only the special knowledge of this work, but also the ordinary knowledge in which he finds himself too much lacking. That is, knowledge of all kinds. This demands normal effort, but efforts of this kind are necessary. Sometimes people enter this work with really hardly any ordinary knowledge. They then have no means of comparing this special knowledge of this work with ordinary knowledge. They have no power of judgment, and so take what they are taught as if it were just ordinary knowledge. They have nothing ready to receive. This is a great difficulty because, having no power of contrasting, they take this work as ordinary knowledge, which means that it falls on ordinary parts of centers, just as the arithmetic table might, or a talk on ways to cook eggs, or make hydrogen from water, or find a square root. The more you study ordinary knowledge, the more you will see how all that the work teaches is extraordinary knowledge, and how it rises over the ideas of ordinary knowledge, which are all disconnected. But by filling roles in centers, through the effort of getting to know what can be known, the whole machine is made stronger, and the breadth of the mind is increased. I repeat that you cannot do this work from a too narrow basis, emotional or intellectual. Again, ordinary knowledge sometimes nourishes the work directly, as when one can see connections and illustrations, and sometimes indirectly, by showing us how it is wrongly understood. In the work, everything can become useful. Once the work has begun to penetrate into one's mind and will and being, and no longer merely lies in the memory, then all life becomes your teacher, as G once said.